Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Philip Brennan was sitting at his desk in the office, reviewing tax spreadsheets for an important client, when his phone vibrated. It was Diane, his wife of 28 years. The message was short: "I'm having dinner with Paula tonight, I'll be home late." Philip just replied with a thumbs-up emoji and went back to work. At 55, he prided himself on being an organized, methodical man, someone who paid attention to details. After all, that's what made him a respected accountant in Atlanta. But lately, those same eyes trained to spot inconsistencies in financial statements had started noticing something off in his own home. Diane, 53, an interior designer with an established clientele, had changed. It wasn't anything obvious, nothing he could point to with absolute certainty, but small signs were piling up like numbers that didn't add up in an audit. She'd started taking calls in another room, always lowering her voice. She'd bought new perfumes, more sophisticated ones, and was dressing with unusual care for supplier visits. She came home with a sparkle in her eyes that Philip hadn't seen in years, but that sparkle was never for him. They had 2 adult children, Michael, 26, a software engineer in Seattle, and Rachel, 24, a teacher in Boston. Both were independent, building their own lives. Their house in Buckhead, an upscale Atlanta neighborhood, now felt too big, too quiet. Philip and Diane shared the space like polite roommates, not the passionate couple they once were. But infidelity? That had never crossed Philip's mind, until today. It was an ordinary Thursday when everything fell apart. Philip was home, working remotely, and needed to find an important tax document he'd filed in his work folder. He rummaged through drawers and folders until his fingers touched something unusual at the bottom of one compartment, a folded, crumpled piece of paper. Philip picked it up, unfolded it, and read it. It was a prescription. The name at the top made his heart race: Dr. Alan Pritchard, Cardiology. The address was for a private clinic downtown in Atlanta, a place Philip was certain Diane had never mentioned. But what truly chilled him was the date: 3 weeks ago. Philip sat down slowly. Diane had never had heart problems. He managed the family's health insurance, reviewed every charge, every appointment. There was no record of any visit to a cardiologist. So why did she have this prescription? And who was Alan Pritchard? Philip felt pressure in his chest, a mix of contained anger and disbelief. He grabbed his phone, typed the clinic's name into Google, and found the address. Without thinking twice, he called. "Pritchard Cardiology Clinic, good morning," answered a gentle female voice. Philip took a deep breath, adopting his most professional tone. "Good morning. This is Philip Brennan. My wife, Diane Brennan, is a patient of Dr. Pritchard. I'm trying to confirm her upcoming appointment times, but my schedule is all mixed up." There was a pause. "Let me check, sir." The sound of keys being tapped. "Diane Brennan, yes, she's been here 3 times in the past 2 months. Her last appointment was 3 weeks ago. There's no follow-up scheduled at the moment." Philip felt the floor vanish beneath his feet. 3 times, he repeated, his voice controlled. Did she always come alone? The receptionist hesitated. "Actually, sir, she was always accompanied by Dr. Pritchard. He brought her in all 3 times." Philip hung up before she could say anything else. His hands were shaking. He looked again at the prescription, turning it over, searching for more information. On the back, a handwritten note: "Alan, 7 p.m., same place as always." The handwriting was Diane's. Philip felt a wave of heat rise up his neck. He wasn't a man who acted on impulse, but at that moment, all his calm methodicalness turned into cold determination. He opened his laptop, created a fake Facebook profile, and typed, "Alan Pritchard, Atlanta, cardiologist." Within seconds, he found him. The profile was public. Alan Pritchard, 58, divorced, with a confident smile and neatly trimmed gray hair. The photos showed a man who liked living well, fancy restaurants, trips to the coast, social events. Philip scrolled through the timeline, examining each image with the trained eye of someone searching for details. And then he saw it. A photo from 3 weeks ago, taken at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown in Atlanta. Alan was alone in the picture, but in the background, slightly blurred, Philip recognized something, a turquoise silk scarf with a golden peacock pattern. He'd bought it for Diane last Christmas at an expensive boutique on Peachtree Street. It was unique, unmistakable. Philip zoomed in on the photo. There it was, draped over the shoulder of a woman sitting at a table in the background. The woman was Diane. Philip slammed the laptop shut. He took a deep breath, trying to control the fury bubbling inside him. There was no more doubt. Diane was having an affair with Alan Pritchard. And she'd been foolish enough to leave a trail. Philip checked the clock. 3:30 p.m. Diane had said she'd be home late, but he knew she usually got back around 6 p.m. when she didn't have real commitments. He had time. Philip grabbed his phone and called his lawyer, Martin Kellerman, an old friend from college days. "Martin, I need you. Now." "Philip? What happened?" "Diane is cheating on me. I have proof. I need to know my rights, what I can do, how to protect my assets." Martin was silent for a moment. "Come to my office. Now." Philip took the prescription, took screenshots of Alan's profile and the photos, and left the house. 40 minutes later, he was in Martin's office, spreading the evidence across the desk. Martin examined everything carefully, his expression grave. "This is enough," Martin said finally. "With this evidence, we can argue marital infidelity. In Georgia, that can affect asset division, especially since most of the assets are in your name. The house, investment accounts, all accumulated through your work, right?" "Right. Diane always had her own income, but it was never substantial. I paid for the house, the cars, everything." Martin nodded. "Then you're in a strong position. I'll prepare the divorce filing. I can have it ready by tomorrow morning. As for the assets, I recommend you change the passwords on all joint accounts immediately and get an appraiser for the house. Do you want to move fast?" "As fast as possible." "Then we'll do it this way. You'll get the papers tomorrow morning. I suggest you confront her tonight, make it clear it's over, and serve her the papers tomorrow. Don't give her time to organize or try to hide anything." Philip left Martin's office with a plan. He returned home, sat in the living room, and waited. The house was silent, only the sound of the old clock in the hallway marking the minutes. Philip held the prescription in his hands, reading and rereading it, feeling his anger harden into resolve. He wasn't a man who shouted or made scenes. But he also wasn't a man to be made a fool of. At 6:15 p.m., the garage door opened. Philip heard Diane's car pull in, the door slam, her footsteps in the kitchen. She walked into the living room with a shopping bag, her face flushed, a distracted smile on her lips. "Hi, honey. You're home? I thought you'd be working late." Philip didn't move. He simply held up the prescription, pinching it between 2 fingers. "Diane. Since when do you have heart problems?" Her smile froze. She looked at the paper, then at him, her eyes widening slightly. "What, how did you?" Philip stood slowly, approaching her with measured steps. 3 appointments with Dr. Alan Pritchard. Private clinic downtown. Always accompanied by him. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Do you want to tell me what's going on, or should I just call him now and ask directly?" Diane dropped the shopping bag to the floor. Her face went from flushed to pale in seconds. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Philip, this isn't what you think." "No?" Philip took a step forward, his voice low, controlled, but sharp as a blade. Then explain it to me. Explain why you've been to a clinic you never mentioned 3 times. Explain why a cardiologist took you there. Explain this note on the back, Alan, 7 p.m., same place as always. Explain it, Diane. I'm waiting. Diane started to cry. It wasn't delicate crying, it was desperate, sobbing. Philip, I'm so sorry. I didn't plan this. Alan and I met at a design event 6 months ago. He was renovating his office, needed a designer. We started talking, and it just happened. Philip felt a wave of nausea. It just happened. How convenient. Things just happen, right? You had no choice, of course. You just tripped and fell into his bed. It wasn't like that. Diane wiped her face with trembling hands. Philip, you don't understand. We've been distant for years. You live locked in that office, talking about taxes and spreadsheets. When was the last time you really looked at me? When did we last talk about something that wasn't bills or renovations? Philip gave a short, bitter laugh. So it's my fault. I work too hard to keep this house, to pay for this comfortable life you love, and it's my fault. Got it. I'm not saying it's your fault. Diane shouted, her voice breaking. I'm saying I felt invisible. Alan makes me feel special, listens to me, makes me feel alive again. Alive. Philip repeated the word as if it were poison. Alan makes you feel alive. Great. I hope he also makes you feel sheltered, because you won't be living here anymore. Diane's eyes widened. What are you saying? I'm saying it's over, Diane. It's over. Tomorrow morning you'll receive the divorce papers. I've already spoken to my lawyer. I have all the proof I need. You'll leave this house, and you'll leave without taking anything beyond what's legally yours, which, I assure you, isn't much. Philip, you can't do this. This house is mine too. I've lived here for 28 years. Philip stepped closer, his eyes cold. And you threw it all away for a divorced doctor using you as a distraction. Congratulations. Now you can go live with him. I'm sure he'll love the permanent company. Diane tried to grab his arm, but Philip pulled away. Please, Philip. We can talk. We can try couples therapy. I broke things off with Alan today, I swear. I was confused, but now I know I want our family back. Philip stopped, turned slowly. Confused? You were confused? 3 fake appointments, dozens of messages, secret meetings at fancy restaurants. That's not confusion, Diane. That's a choice. You chose him. Now you'll have to live with the consequences. And about our family? He shook his head. Michael and Rachel will know exactly what you did. They deserve the truth. No. You can't tell them. It'll destroy them. No, Diane. You already destroyed it. I'm just going to be honest with our kids. Something you clearly don't know how to do. Diane collapsed to her knees, sobbing, but Philip was already walking up the stairs. He entered the bedroom, pulled 2 large suitcases from the closet, and began filling them with her clothes. Every piece he folded, every shoe he placed in the suitcase, was a quiet act of revenge. He didn't yell, didn't break anything, didn't lose control. He simply carried out the plan with the same methodical precision he used in his work. When he finished, he came downstairs and left the suitcases in the living room. Diane was still on the floor, leaning against the wall, her face red and swollen. Philip took her car keys and held them out. You have until noon tomorrow to get the rest of your things. After that, I'm changing the locks. If you need anything after that, call Martin, my lawyer. I don't want to speak to you directly anymore. Philip, please. No, he cut her off, his voice firm. There's nothing left to say. You made your choice. Now you'll have to live with it. Diane picked up the suitcases, unsteady on her feet, and walked out the front door. Philip heard her car start and drive away down the street. Then, finally alone, he sat on the couch and let the adrenaline fade. His hands were shaking. He took several deep breaths, trying to process what had just happened. 28 years of marriage. 28 years. Destroyed by a doctor with an easy smile and empty promises. Philip picked up his phone and called Michael. Son, I need to talk to you and your sister. It's important. The next morning, Philip was at Martin's office at 8 sharp. The papers were ready, printed on letterhead, each clause drafted with legal precision. Philip signed where needed, and Martin arranged for the filing to be delivered to Diane that same afternoon. Then Philip went to the bank, changed the passwords on all joint accounts, removed his name from accounts Diane used alone, and transferred half the money from shared accounts into a new individual account. It was what the law allowed, and he wasn't leaving room for surprises. That afternoon, Michael and Rachel arrived by plane. Philip waited for them in the living room, the same room where he'd confronted Diane the day before. They walked in, worried, and Philip told them everything. Every detail. The prescription, the fake appointments, Alan Pritchard, the confrontation. He didn't spare his children the raw truth. Michael stayed silent, jaw clenched, fists tight. Rachel cried, but her tears were angry, not sad. How could she? Rachel whispered. How could Mom do this to you, to us? Philip shook his head. I don't know, sweetheart. But she did. And now you need to decide how you want to handle this. I won't force you to pick sides, but I also won't lie about what happened. Michael stood up, pacing the room. I don't want to talk to her. Not now. Maybe never. Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes. Diane tried calling her children that night, but both declined. She sent desperate messages asking for a chance to explain, but the replies were short and cold. Michael wrote, "You betrayed Dad. You betrayed us. I have nothing to say to you right now." Rachel simply blocked her number. The following days were a bureaucratic haze. Lawyers, documents, asset evaluations. Philip dove into the process the same way he dove into complex audits, methodical, focused, relentless. Martin presented the evidence of infidelity to the judge, arguing that Diane had violated marital trust and therefore wasn't entitled to an equal division of assets. The house, bought and paid for entirely by Philip over the years, would stay with him. The investment accounts, too. Diane would only be entitled to assets she'd brought into the marriage and half of what had been accumulated in joint accounts, a modest sum, considering Philip had always been the main provider. Diane hired a lawyer and tried to counter-argue, but the evidence was irrefutable. Alan Pritchard, upon learning he was being named in the divorce proceedings, panicked. He called Diane, desperate, saying he couldn't afford a public scandal, he had a reputation to protect, patience to consider. He ended things via text message, blocked her number, and disappeared. Diane was left alone, without the husband she'd taken for granted and without the lover who'd promised to make her feel alive. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Philip kept the house, most of the assets, and his dignity intact. Diane moved into a small apartment in Decatur, a modest neighborhood far from the comfortable life she'd known in Buckhead. Her interior design clientele, once stable, began to dwindle. Rumors spread through Atlanta's social circles. No one wanted to hire the designer who'd cheated on her devoted husband with a married doctor. Doors closed one by one, and Diane found herself alone, taking on small, poorly paid projects just to make ends meet. Philip, on the other hand, began rebuilding. The first few months were hard, he wouldn't deny that. There were nights when loneliness weighed heavily, when he wondered if he could have done something differently. But then he remembered the prescription, the lies, the conscious choices Diane had made. And the pain turned into resolve. He reconnected with old friends, college classmates he hadn't seen in years. He started attending social events, dinners, alumni gatherings. Michael and Rachel visited often, and Philip realized that his relationship with his children, once cordial but distant, had deepened. They admired how he'd faced the betrayal, his dignity, his refusal to be destroyed. 6 months after the divorce, Philip decided to do something he'd always wanted: travel through Europe. He booked a 3-week Mediterranean cruise, alone, with no rigid plans, just the intention to rest and rediscover who he was outside the role of the betrayed husband. It was in Santorini, during a dinner on the ship's deck, that he met Clara. Clara was 52, a retired literature professor from Boston, widowed for 2 years. She was also traveling alone, trying to rebuild her life after losing her husband to aggressive cancer. They started talking by chance, seated at the same table during a group dinner, and discovered unexpected common ground. Clara was calm, intelligent, honest in a way Philip hadn't encountered in a long time. They spent the rest of the cruise together, talking for hours, walking through ancient towns, laughing at silly jokes. It wasn't a whirlwind romance or instant passion. It was something better: genuine connection, mutual respect, companionship. When the cruise ended, they exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch. And they did. Calls, messages, visits. Clara traveled to Atlanta, Philip went to Boston. Slowly, carefully, they built something new. A year after the divorce, Philip was sitting in the garden of his Buckhead home, having breakfast with Clara. Morning sun filtered through the trees, birds sang, and for the first time in years, Philip felt at peace. Michael and Rachel loved Clara, and she treated them with genuine affection, never trying to replace their mother, just being herself. Diane, meanwhile, lived in isolation. She'd tried reconnecting with her children, but both kept their distance. Rachel accepted occasional calls, brief, polite, but cold. Michael simply didn't respond. The social circle Diane had cultivated for years avoided her. Invitations to events stopped coming. Old friends crossed the street to avoid greeting her. She faced the consequences of her choices every day, alone in an apartment that seemed to shrink each morning. Alan Pritchard moved on with his life, indifferent. He never reached out again, never apologized, never looked back. To him, Diane had been a temporary distraction, a disposable amusement. She realized that far too late. One afternoon, Diane drove past the old house in Buckhead. She saw Philip in the garden, laughing with a gray-haired woman, and felt a pang of regret so intense she had to pull over. She cried there, alone, finally understanding what she'd lost: not just the house, not just financial comfort, but her family, her respect, the life she'd built over nearly 3 decades. All destroyed by an illusion, by a fantasy that promised excitement but delivered only loneliness. Philip never spoke to Diane again directly. All communication went through lawyers, brief and formal. He no longer felt anger or resentment. Just indifference. Diane had become part of the past, a lesson learned, a chapter closed. He moved forward, lighter, wiser, surrounded by people who truly mattered. And Diane learned, in the most painful way possible, that confusion isn't an excuse to destroy an entire life. That choices have consequences. That Philip didn't need shouting or violence to get his revenge, he simply needed to be clear, firm, and move on. And that's exactly what he did. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.